We are the Borg. We have scanned your story, and it has many holes in it. Alright, so the story of the Borg has some problems. Mostly the same sorts of problems you see with comic books, soap operas, and you name anything else. Too many cooks, not enough consistency.
And welcome back to the heart of the stories we tell. I'm Rob, the host, and this is another look deep into what makes a story, a theory on storytelling by a storyteller who believes that every story has merit. And tonight's episode is...
What is up with the Borg? Alright, so we're going to start with some low-hanging fruit and something I've covered before. But first, since this is the first real episode of this, I want to talk about what I'm doing here. I've spent the last 3 years taking apart stories, figuring out how they work, why we like them, why we don't like them, and putting them back together. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to try to just patch up ones that are not working. And now part of this is that this is not a whole ground one rewrite, because if it were that, it would have to be a lot more in-depth and be one of my pitches. So instead, when I find a story that doesn't totally suck, but needs a little bit of work, this is what we're going to work on. And now, this particular thing is because I just watched an entire 50-something part thing where the anti-trekker was going on about it, and where he and Lore Reloaded both make some excellent points and go into way more detail than I'm going to here. They seem to have missed some rather crucial bits of information, things that I think fix the holes they keep seeing. Now, first of all, Anti-Trekker goes on about the fact that the whole thing between Q and Guinan doesn't go anywhere, but I think Voyager paid that off with the phrase, "We do not antagonize the Borg." But to handle that, I'm going to have to do a little side second part of this, talking about Elorians. For right now, I just want to stick to the Borg itself. Now, Steve Shives has a funny thing where he asks who messed up the Borg. Was it Voyager? Was it Next Gen? Was it First Contact? And I have to say, Voyager gets a lot of crap, even from me, especially when they lost track of those torpedoes. But I think it can still work. It just needs a little bit of patching. Now, like anything, too many patches stops being able to hold. So we're going to see where that hits the limit here. But alright, for those of you that don't know, this is a new series where I'm trying to fix problems. But in general, I do reviews and theory videos. This falls into the broad category of theory videos. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to hear more from me, click the subscribe button and join me as we take a walk through the heart of all the stories we tell. Alright, so let's get some patching. And we're going to start with the fact that, like I said, this really came up because Anti-Trekker and Lore Reloaded both did Borg things. I actually reacted already to part of Lore Reloaded's thing. But Anti-Trekker has this huge thing. I mean, like, literally, he has more videos just on his First Contact review than I think I have on any one subject. And that's just part of his Borg story. But he literally starts with the episode of Enterprise and then says it doesn't really work because Q-Who is their first real appearance. Well, here's the thing. Q-Who is not their first appearance. It's their first appearance on screen, but they were interested in the Federation before. So let's take a second to just talk about where the Borg come from. First of all, out of story. The Borg are the scary idea that technology may someday overtake us and interact with us. And for the record, there are people in the real world who like this idea. And I don't mean people who came to it from Star Trek. Transhumanists is something that dates back to the 70s. And much like missing that, so too did he miss Encounter at the Neutral Zone, which was near the end of Season 2. We see the Borg have scooped up cities on the Neutral Zone on both the Romulan and Federation side, and they don't know who's responsible yet. So come Q-Who, they are investigating, but they see the same sort of damage to the outpost. And that is why there's no time travel needed to round the edge that is Enterprise, First Contact, and Q-Who. And it all comes down to this little guy right here. This little baby inside the simulator. Now remember, everything that we're told about the Borg and everything that we see about the Borg don't necessarily have to add up. We can find out new information that changes a theory on how the Borg interact perfectly fine. And that message can come from First Contact or Enterprise. Everything Janeway finds out can be true. I have to admit the Borg Queen is far from my favorite retcon, but we can make most of this all work. But let's start with where the Borg come from in story. And I'm going to postulate my own theory, one that I think works better than anything the others have said so far. The anti-trucker theory is that the Borg started off as something similar to something we saw in the first series, the original series, where they were all components of one large creature. And of course, this makes sense because that's what the Borg actually are in Q Who. Except for here's the thing, it doesn't have to be. Like I said, in the real world, we have transhumanists that already want to make a collective like this. And you don't need an entire civilization, you just need a cult. In fact, this cult works better if it's on something like a federation. Imagine a federation of planets, way off in the Delta Quadrant. Imagine that there was a small cult that believed that the only way to make themselves better, and they have this woman who is their cult leader. And she believes that if they all download and adjust themselves, and because of religious tolerance and because of free will, everyone lets them Borgify themselves. Especially with the fact that, it's actually a stupid plan if you think about it. Because no matter how long you extend your life physically, those drones are not going to live forever. And with the drones not living forever, neither does the Borg collective. Sooner or later, each individual Borg grows up, grows old, and dies. The end. No Borg. Well, sort of. Alright, so the Borg started off as a cult. Maybe an interracial one, maybe just a single race. All that's needed is for them to have star travel, and for them to Borgify themselves, and then realize that the collective will not go on forever. Now, they have two options. They can go completely mechanical, which obviously is not their goal, or they have to start assimilating new people. Now, they have a couple of options here, but I'm going to say that the collective is relatively smart, and it poops out its own cult leader. You remember her? Well, now this is her, and she is a seductress that helps convince other people to be assimilated. It doesn't even need to just be this queen necessarily, but sooner or later, seduction and bringing new people in and promising them perfection isn't going to work. Sooner or later, they are going to have to forcefully start taking people. And when they do, they're going to assimilate their own planet first. And once they do, of course, they need to expand. And in their pursuit of perfection, they need to find others like them. Which, remember, isn't too hard because the Star Trek universe has a whole bunch of humanoids that have the same base concept as humans, even if they have slightly weird forehead thingies. So, with that, they start assimilating. But once they get to a certain point, they're the biggest, most powerful thing in their quadrant, in their area. They are the big fish. And with that, they go through a change. They stop assimilating most things, and they start pulling technology. Hey, this new race they found has replicators. Hey, this new race they found uses, instead of antimatter, singularity point engines. Hey, this new race has this. Hey, that. And for the most part, they continue on. They might even start cloning, but that doesn't really matter. All that matters is the collective is growing and growing, but is not really learning or getting any better. And with that, they go through a change. They stop assimilating most things, and they start pulling technology. Hey, this new race they found has replicators. Hey, this new race they found uses, instead of antimatter, singularity point engines. Hey, this new race has this. Hey, that. And for the most part, they continue on. They might even start cloning, but that doesn't really matter. All that matters is the collective is growing and growing, but is not really learning or getting any better. So I put forward that it stagnates, and when it stagnates, it has to start assimilating people again. And then it gets to the point where it doesn't need to, and it's the biggest boy on the block, and so on. In fact, I'm willing to bet that over thousands upon thousands of years, much longer than Starfleet or the Federation, they go through this cycle, and they bring out, depending on the situation, different types of assimilation. Now, with that comes a big change. Especially if my side theory is right about the Elorians, they've once again hit a plateau, until they receive this message about the Alpha Quadrant, and the fact that there's a planet called Earth that has a potential new race to absorb. So they begin by sending out a scout ship, and that's what we find is what's on the Romulan border. Picking up little bits and pieces, but they don't find anything that's interesting. I mean, humans kinda suck. Until Q takes it upon himself to throw the flagship of the Federation, the best of the best. And then, well, the Borg learn pretty quickly, and they step up their process. And they go through the same idea. Well, we may not need a queen right this second, although somewhere in the database, somewhere in the cloud, there is still a queen. What they really need is a spokesperson. They want to assimilate Jean-Luc Picard. And with that, everything fits. At least more or less. Now, next week, I'm going to also deal with this patch with part 2, where we talk about the Elorians and what they could possibly do to scare Q, and why it is the fact that they were assimilated scares them enough to say we don't irritate the Borg. But, of course, there's one last problem, the Hansons. I can't make that work. So leave me a comment down below, though. Do you think that this fixes? Do you think that this is plausible? Do you think this is something that some writer going forward could take and run with? And most importantly, oh god, how could you make the Hansons in 7 of 9 work? I'm trying here. Now, this is my first attempt, and like I said, patching holes, it's kind of hard when you patch over patches. So, if you could, leave me a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click subscribe, and help me out. Make this channel grow. Let's see what we can't do. I get the feeling that fixing Last Jedi is going to be a huge, almost impossibly Herculean task, and there's more coming after that. But next week we're going to talk about Elorians, and then I think I'm going to actually finally do what I said I was going to do months ago, and pitch my own way I would move Star Trek forward. So, if you're a Trekkie, this is a great time to jump on here, but even if you're not, we also handle all sorts of other things. I hope you have a good night, and thanks for watching.